Hey guys.
Hey everybody.
Welcome to another Sunday Travel Therapy Mentor live video. Today we're going to be talking about a little bit of reflection on our part. So about 5 years ago we graduated, almost exactly 5 years ago we graduated, started traveling right away. Initially we had some plans and those plans have changed a ton. So we want to reflect back on where we've come from, what our plans were initially to what they've become now, and some lessons that we've learned along the way that will hopefully help you guys, current travelers and new travelers. So Whitney's going to introduce us and then we'll jump into that topic.
All right, hey everybody. My name is Whitney Aiken.
And I'm Jared Kazaza.
And we are both traveling physical therapists. Some of you guys may know us from our website and our online business, Travel Therapy Mentor. We also have a personal blog that's called Fifth Wheel Physical Therapist. So for the past several years, we've been bringing you guys content about travel therapy, about our adventures, about our travels. And tonight we just kind of want to give a synopsis, like Jared said, of our last 5 years. We're coming up on our 5-year anniversary from our graduation from DPT school, and that kind of means 5 years since we started travel therapy because we started right away as new grads. So there's a lot to look back on. It's kind of interesting to see kind of where we came from and where we are now and the plans that we laid out. So we'll talk to you guys about that. Jared is going to share our video in a couple of groups so that more people can join on with us live. If you're already joining on with us live, we'd love if you'd say hello in the comments. I see quite a few of you guys have hopped on. We'd love if you'd say hi and just let us know who you are. Are you a travel therapist? Are you a student? Are you somebody who's thinking about travel therapy? We'd love to hear from you. We hope that some of our information tonight will be helpful to you guys just to sort of, hear what somebody else's path has been like as a travel therapist for 5 years, and just hear some wisdom and some insight from us that'll maybe help you along your journey. And hopefully if you're a student or a new grad, it'll sort of help you just to see that, life isn't always exactly as you plan it. You can make plans, but, kind of a moral of what we're going to talk about today is it's important to be flexible too and kind of let your plans grow and evolve as your life does, because you just never know what's going to happen. I think that's ever more important right now with the pandemic situation. We're definitely in different shoes than we would have thought otherwise. We'll talk more about that tonight. We are new homeowners, and that was completely not really part of the plan, at least not this soon. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So I see a few of you guys have tuned in. Hi Jeff, hi Mike, hey Blake. Blake says he's a third-year student and loves our content. Thanks Blake, we appreciate you watching. If anybody else is tuning in live, say hello. If you're watching later on the replay, which I know some of you guys do, you can say #TeamReplay and let us know that you watched. So like I said, Jared's just getting our video shared in a couple of groups so that a couple more people can join on with us live and hopefully just learn a little bit about our story. Hey Mike, thanks for joining. So I guess we'll kind of start back just the beginning of our story together. We started dating in 2013 when we were in PT school. And a lot of people think that we met in PT school or we went to the same PT school. We actually did not. We actually knew each other we're from the same hometown. We're both from Roanoke, Virginia, and we sort of knew each other in high school, just sort of were acquaintances. And then later on in life, when we were both in physical therapy school, we ended up running into each other again and kind of hit it off and found out we were both in physical therapy school at different schools. So that summer I was in town where we're from in Roanoke. I had one of my clinicals here, and Jared was here because his school was actually in our hometown. So we ended up started dating between our first and second year of PT school.
Yep. And one interesting thing, before we ever even started dating, we ever really even knew each other were in PT school, I decided that I wanted to travel after graduation. Mostly that was because of the higher pay. And then when I met Whitney and she was also in PT school, I told her about that, and she kind of didn't really have a whole lot of plan for what to do after graduation, so we decided to travel together. So our initial plan was to travel for about 5 years. I think this was mostly my initial plan just because I'm much more, I try to plan for the long term, and I think Whitney didn't really put a whole lot of thought into what would happen, but initially I think about 5 years of traveling we were planning on doing, paying down our debt, saving up some money to buy some investment properties, and then settling down after that point. Well, now we're 5 years in, and a lot of that hasn't happened at all. Our initial plan really hasn't Some of it has, some of it hasn't. But we're in a much different place than I ever would have imagined 5 years ago.
But kind of been for the better. I mean, things
Yeah.
have worked out really awesome. So some of that has happened. So about second year, I think it was probably that summer we met when you first learned about travel therapy. Because
Your hair is looking particularly luxurious. Jeez.
Thank you very
Wow.
much. I blow dried
That's
it.
nice.
I don't usually do that. Appreciate it, Jared. So that summer you had a PT at your clinical that was a travel therapist, and that's kind of where you learned about travel therapy. And we started talking about it then, but I wasn't really sold. I didn't know for sure. But I think probably by second year we started talking about it more, and we decided that would be a fun thing to do. So by second year we had thought, okay, this is what we're going to do. And we even by third year, or maybe towards the end of second year, started talking about living in a camper. We started thinking about buying an RV to travel in, and that was a suggestion from one of my patients who had traveled in an RV, and he suggested that we try that if we were going to be doing travel therapy, because he knew some travel nurses that did that. So by third year, we had pretty solidly, I'd say at least 6 months before we graduated, we decided for sure that's what we were going to do. We were already starting to look at campers, and that was going to be our plan. So when graduation rolled around, we graduated in May of 2015. We were already talking to recruiters. We had taken the April boards, and we were ready to take our first travel job. So we decided to take our first travel job in Virginia, which is our home state, because we just felt like it would be a little more secure to take a job closer to home. We also felt like, it would be less of a risk, financially to invest in moving across the country and all that when we barely had any money anyway, because we were students.
Looking back now, I think we were probably a little naive. I was so dead set on trying to earn money as soon as possible, and I thought that was so important. So we both agreed to take the board exam early so that as soon as we graduated, we could start looking for jobs. We wanted to look in Virginia, partially so that we had less invested if we hated travel therapy, and partially because we knew that we'd be able to start working sooner.
Mm-hmm.
So
we also had some family stuff. We had some weddings to go to. I remember at that time we had a recruiter that sort of suggested these jobs in Alaska as our first jobs, and we were like, I think that would be a little too much. And we wouldn't be able to come back for a couple weddings, especially my sister's wedding. So we ended up deciding on Virginia as our first job, and we got jobs really close to home, actually. At that point, we were also trying to decide whether we were going to buy the camper right away or wait a little while. We didn't have money saved up right away, so if we'd done it right away, we would have had to get a loan, and we might have even needed a co-signer on that loan. And we ultimately decided that wasn't the right choice for us. We figured we could really quickly, within 3 to 6 months, earn enough money as travel PTs to buy it in cash instead of having to get a loan. So that's what we did.
Yeah, and there's a few different reasons for that. One is because, we wanted to pay cash. We didn't really want to deal with a loan on a camper and a truck. The other thing was, at least for the first 3 months, we wanted to make sure that travel therapy was even something that we would be able to do or something that we would like doing. So we wanted to give ourselves an easy out if we didn't like it. So if we went ahead and bought the camper and truck right away, then we're kind of stuck. But if we didn't and we just found a short-term rental while we're saving to buy it, then we can see how we like traveling and then decide how to go from there.
Yep, so our very first assignment, we were about maybe an hour and a half from our hometown. We found our first apartment that we rented was on Craigslist, so we used Craigslist to find housing. We ended up being able to, just by the time our 3 months was up for our first contract, we had either the option to leave or go ahead and extend. Jared particularly was having a really good experience at his first contract, so he decided it would be a good idea for him to extend. So I ended up finding another job in the same area, so we were able to live in the same place and go ahead and extend. So we stayed at our first place for 6 months in the apartment that we rented. And then right around that time, we started looking for the camper. We had saved enough money to buy the camper and the truck, and around December of 2015, maybe 6 months, 5 to 6 months after we graduated, we had saved enough and we went ahead and bought a camper. And our first night we spent in the camper, so this was right around Christmas, and again, we were coming up at the end of that extension and my new contract, and we decided we could either extend again or we could go ahead and look for another job. Jared was still having a really good experience at his first job, so we ended up extending again. So we ended up staying in the same region for 9 months.
Yeah.
And I found a different job for that third time. So he kept staying in the same place and I kept kind of moving around. Well, luckily we were able to find a campground not very far from where we had our first apartment.
Yeah, I really enjoyed my first assignment, and part of the reason why we stayed so long is, one, it was very convenient to be so close to home. Two, I really liked it, and I felt like maybe this was a fluke in terms of travel therapy. Maybe I just got really lucky, and then if I moved to somewhere else, it wouldn't be as good. That turned out to not be the case. I mean, there's a lot of good assignments we've had over the years. Some I liked even more than that, but I was just kind of scared to leave a really good situation where I was making a lot of money.
Yeah.
Which is understandable, and I think a lot of new grads that we talk to and new travelers are in that same kind of situation. Maybe they end up with a very good first contract and they stay there either for 6 to 9 months as a traveler, or they end up just going perm there because it's such a good place. So
I know our friend Jeff is watching, and they're doing the same thing. They thought they were going to leave, and they've extended a couple times at their first assignment because it's going really well, and it's especially during this time right now in 2020 with the pandemic and all the craziness, it's been going really well for them. So they're extending, and I think it might be 9 months that they'll end up being there.
Yep.
I want to take a step back and say, Jared mentioned that we thought we would travel for about 5 years. There were a few reasons for that. We just felt like that was enough time probably to see what we wanted to see. We also felt like around 5 years, which is right now, by the way, that I would be almost 30, which in 3 weeks is my birthday, and I turned 30, and we thought maybe that might be the time that we'd be ready to sort of settle down, maybe have kids, biological clock is ticking, all that good stuff. So that's why we thought 5 years. Well, in that 5 years, we thought our plan would be to start on the East Coast and kind of zigzag our way across the country. We wanted to see, the Northeast, the Southeast, Texas, kind of a little bit in the Midwest, down to, California, Arizona, up to the Pacific Northwest. So we thought in 5 years' time we would hit all those places, and we'll tell you a little bit about kind of what has happened. Yeah,
and I think probably after that 9 months in our original area for our first contracts, we went to the Northeast, and around that time is when we were kind of sketching out this plan a little more in depth, where we would kind of zigzag across the country. So we had been in Virginia, Northeast. Both of us had experience. Whitney went to college kind of in the southeast of the U.S., so we wanted to get some experience all over the country. So it made sense for us in the camper to not make a long move all at one time. So our plan was Virginia, Northeast, maybe down to Texas, up to maybe Montana, down to Arizona, up to Washington. So something like that. We actually wrote an article about this, and so that was our plan. So if we could see all those places, take weekend trips from each of those assignment locations, we'd be able to see most of the country. And at the end of 5 years, maybe we just stop in Washington, sell the camper, come back to Virginia and settle down. Or we find somewhere else along the way that we really loved and we stayed there. So that was our plan. In reality, it is not so easy to do that.
Yeah. So we got kind of a good start on that. We probably stayed in Virginia a little longer than we planned to, but our next place that we got licensed was Massachusetts. And we've talked about this before. When you guys are mapping out where you might want to go for travel therapy, you can pick a general region, but we usually recommend you try to pick a state that particularly tends to have a lot of jobs. And the way to find that out is usually to talk to recruiters and see where they tend to see a lot of jobs. So when we looked at the Northeast, we thought maybe we'd really like to go to Maine or Vermont or New Hampshire, but there just didn't seem to be a lot of jobs in Maine or Vermont or New Hampshire consistently where we'd probably be able to line up 2 jobs together. So we ended up choosing Massachusetts.
Yeah, and even more importantly, in our decision, first it was kind of the region that we were looking for, but we were also looking for 2 outpatient jobs specifically. So not only are we looking for states that have a lot of jobs, so that we have a higher chance of finding something, but also some states that have a lot of outpatient jobs. So yeah, our first choice would have been Maine. So from Virginia to Maine, turns out that there's not a lot of jobs in Maine, and there's very few outpatient jobs. So the chances of us finding 2 outpatient jobs in the same area in Maine was very low. And then second choice, New Hampshire, also same situation. We ended up settling on Massachusetts, which has the most jobs in the Northeast, and in our experience, at least back then, I think that's still the case, and also the most outpatient jobs. So that's kind of how we approached that situation. We wanted to be in that area. We were kind of lenient because we can take weekend trips wherever, but we mostly wanted outpatient jobs.
Yep. So we did make it to the Northeast. Now we thought after that we'd kind of come maybe south or southeast, and we were sort of looking at like South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, and we just weren't really having a lot of good luck with those states. So we ended up settling on North Carolina. It was a fairly quick license. There at that time were a lot of jobs in North Carolina. We ended up getting only as far south as North Carolina. So I want to pause for just a second, and then we'll kind of pick up with North Carolina and see where we went from there. So kind of talking a little bit about our plans during this whole time, this first like 1 or 2 years of our travel career. Part of our plans were financial. So we were looking at, what's our financial future going to look like, student loans, all that kind of stuff. When you're a new grad, you have a little bit of a grace period, and then you have to decide what you're going to do with your student loans.
Yeah, initially, I've talked about this in prior videos, so if you guys have watched that, I apologize for repeating myself, but initially, I planned that we would pay down our debt as soon as possible. So we were going to just put all of our money towards paying down student loans. I thought that made the most sense. I thought that as a traveler making more money, we would do that and we'd be in great shape. Well, close to graduation, probably about a week or two before graduation, I did a ton of research to make sure that was the best plan. And basically, what I found is that going on an income-based plan and saving and investing instead made more sense for our situation. And that's what we ended up doing. And that really kind of changed the trajectory. So initially, I was planning to pay down our debt and then start buying rental properties. What we ended up doing is not paying down our debt, investing a ton in the stock market, building up big emergency funds, things like that. And I think that turned out pretty well for us. It was a little bit of a gamble, but I think that was the right choice. And now looking back, I would not have changed that decision.
Yep. All along during this time, I'd say during our first year or so of being PTs, Jared was reading, and probably back even the end of third year, reading a lot about the FIRE movement, the Financial Independence Retire Early movement, and he started to set a lot of financial goals. And I say he because Jared's been a lot more into the finance stuff than I have. So he's a lot better about reading and learning about the financial side of things and saving. But of course, from a lot of his advice and us doing pretty similar things in terms of our job and our living expenses and all that stuff, I've done pretty well financially too with the saving and everything. But like Jared said, it kind of became a big part of our goal. In the beginning was like, okay, if we're gonna more or less defer our loans, do this income-driven repayment option, now we're gonna invest a huge chunk of our money into investment accounts. With this came frugality. So we were already living in the camper and saving a pretty good amount of money by living in the camper, but some of these choices where we were kind of deciding between staying somewhere a little longer and extending our contract if it was a good financial situation, that kind of swayed us because it might make more financial sense for us just to extend without having to pack up and move and risk having a week or two off. So we definitely turned into the type of travel therapists who extend contracts pretty often. I talked about that first one. We stayed in the same region for 9 months. Jared stayed at the exact same job for 9 months. The second one in Massachusetts, we ended up extending a short extension and then another short extension. I think it ended up being 5 months or so there. And that was because as you'll learn, if you are a travel therapist or you choose to go into travel therapy, when you start getting close to the end of your contract, you're always like playing this game of back and forth of like, am I going to get a new license? Am I going to get licensed in this state? Are there jobs? Should I apply for this job? Should I extend? If it didn't look likely that we were going to find 2 jobs exactly where we wanted to be, we would just see if extending was an option. I don't think we necessarily wanted to stay in Virginia those 9 months, but we were on the hunt the whole time. Each time one of the extensions came up for 2 jobs, and if 2 good jobs weren't looking likely, we were like, well, we could just stay.
Yeah. We've talked about in the past too about how every travel therapist has a reason for traveling. Some of the main reasons are finances, flexibility, and trying different settings. And also seeing different parts of the country. So those are the big reasons. Initially, we definitely were the travelers that were just traveling to make as much money as possible, to save as much as possible. And yeah, like Whitney said, I think early 2015, I started reading a lot of personal finance blogs. The FIRE movement was new then. It's definitely grown a lot since then, but that's kind of when I joined that bandwagon, I would say, and decided that, okay, what we should do is really just try to get to financial independence as soon as possible, and then we have all the options in the world. Mm-hmm. We made a lot of decisions early on to extend. One, because the jobs weren't bad. We found 2 outpatient jobs in the same area a lot of times, and we didn't hate those jobs. They were fine. And 2, because to move to a new location, there's switching costs involved. We had to move the camper. We probably would have to take some time off from work. Might not make as much money. When we extend, we could get bonuses for extensions. Mm-hmm. So we made a lot of additional money that way. Also, a lot of the places that we went to as travelers were low cost of living areas. Especially our first 9 months, we were living in an area that was extremely low cost of living. So we could save a ton of money that way. That really played into our decision making.
Yeah, I think also our trajectory and our plan that we laid out in the beginning helped shape our decisions, because we thought in our minds, okay, we've got 5 whole years that we've planned in our heads to see the whole country. So if we've got 5 whole years, it doesn't hurt to stay 6 months or 9 months in one place. You know, some people might go into travel therapy and they think, I'm only going to do 1 year or 2 years or 3 years tops. So I really have to hit, in their minds, you know, Texas and Hawaii and California, and like they have to do it. So no matter what, they're going to try to make that work. So we're going to get, I know I keep saying we're going to tell you the advice. It's hard to not intertwine it, but it's just, you have to decide your why. Like, what's the important part to you? Because if we had been, you know, we're going to talk here about which states we ended up going to, but if we had been dead set on going to some other states, we probably would have had to sacrifice on the pay and the setting. You know, if we'd been dead set on making it work to go to Hawaii or whatever, we probably couldn't have said, oh, I only want there to be 2 outpatient jobs and I only need it to be such and such pay. So, you know, I said we had planned on kind of zigzagging over 5 years. What did we actually do?
We actually ended up going from Virginia to Massachusetts, back down to North Carolina, staying in North Carolina for quite a while, back to Virginia, back to North Carolina. And that's pretty much what we've done. And basically what we found over that time is that it's nice to be kind of close to home for things like birthdays, weddings, holidays. And we can spend as much time as we want. So once we got to a position of financial security, we can spend as much time as we want traveling outside of that.
Yeah, so that basically kind of threw a wrench in things. That was the next thing I was going to talk about.
Yeah, probably 1.5 years or maybe 2 years into traveling, we kind of came to the realization that, you know, working in different areas is great, but if we can be close to home, take contracts, still, you know, be able to visit family and things like that, then we can use the extra time that we have off. We can take as much time as we want between contracts to travel around the world. We can travel internationally, we can travel all over the country. And that really changed things for us. And that kind of influenced how we've handled the moves and the situation since then.
Yep. So there's been a couple opportunities for us to go to different states and kind of do our zigzag, and it just kept not quite working out the way we wanted to. So when we were in North Carolina the first time, you know, we kind of did okay with our zigzag. You know, it was Virginia and then Massachusetts and then North Carolina. Well, we were going to try to go Midwest next. So we were going to go, Illinois was our next thing that we were going to try to do. So we got Illinois licenses. We started looking at Illinois jobs. And when it came the time, we just weren't seeing jobs in Illinois.
Now, this is the same situation we talked about in the Northeast. We wanted to go to the Midwest. We wanted to go to Michigan. That was our state we wanted to go to. We looked at Michigan, there was not that many jobs. We looked all around Michigan, not that many jobs. We settled on Illinois because it had the most outpatient jobs and the most jobs available in that region. And we knew that from Illinois we could take weekend trips to anywhere we wanted to in the Midwest. And I think a lot of travelers get stuck on, I need to go to just this state or this area. And what ends up happening with that is you have difficulty finding jobs. Mm-hmm. In this situation, we still had difficulty finding jobs. Even though we chose the one that was probably the best of the bunch in the Midwest.
So I think what we didn't realize is when we were sort of tracking the trends, we kept seeing all these outpatient jobs in Illinois, and it looked like they were a bunch of different cities. But what we didn't know is that there's a ton of different city names that are in basically metro Chicago. Like, it was more or less all on the outskirts of Chicago. And we thought in our head, when you're just looking at a list of names of cities you've never been to, like, oh, those are probably all over the state, right? They were mostly near Chicago, and we had the camper.
Yeah, and as you can guess, in a metro area around a big city, there's not a lot of campgrounds. And if there are, they're very expensive. So that was not ideal for us.
Yep, so we this is the first time we started sort of our bob back and forth between Virginia and North Carolina. We were in North Carolina, our assignment was ending, extending was not an option. Illinois wasn't working out. We didn't want to go back to Massachusetts. We ended up finding 2 pretty good jobs in Virginia. So we ended up in Virginia. And then after Virginia, we ended up back in North Carolina.
Well, actually, North Carolina, we took some jobs in the middle of North Carolina, and then we were looking in Illinois. It wasn't working out. We found these great jobs on the coast of North Carolina. We were like, okay, we can't pass up 3 months at the beach. We'll go there. And we ended up doing that. And then from there, we went back to Virginia.
And then from there, it was we were going to still try to go for Illinois. Oh no, I think at this point we decided Arizona. We decided what the heck? We've already wasted how many years were we into travel PT at this point?
Probably
Two and a half or two. We were like, you know what? Forget about Illinois. We're just gonna let that license lapse. Let's just go ahead and start the West Coast part of this journey. So we decided on Arizona. So we were like, let's go to Arizona, and then it ended up not working out. And we ended up going back to North Carolina, and then we were in North Carolina, and we had job offers. I think either in Massachusetts where we were already licensed, or Arizona when we were in Western Carolina. Do you remember?
I think we had job offers in Massachusetts, but we did not want to go to Massachusetts again.
So just out of the blue, the old job that we had been at on the coast of North Carolina, we found out needed some people again. So we ended up going back to the coast of North Carolina. Now, I remember distinctly, this is a very big pivot point for us. So for a little while, maybe toward year 2 or so, Jared had been saying, you know, once we get to a pretty good financial stability point, we don't necessarily have to like work back-to-back contracts. Because that was another part of our financial goal, was we worked back-to-back contracts.
Yeah, it was probably somewhere around 2 years in when I really got into financial independence and reading about personal finance and things like that. I found the concept of geographical arbitrage, which is basically traveling around the world to lower cost of living areas where you can travel and see things for probably less than the cost of living back in the US. And specifically that was, I was reading about people doing that in Southeast Asia. So I thought about it once we got in a situation where we were pretty financially stable, that it wouldn't be that difficult for us to take an extended period of time to go to Southeast Asia and travel around. Mm-hmm. Initially, that sounded crazy to us, and especially Whitney. She thought that was a crazy thing.
I didn't even know. I was like, I'm gonna have to pull out the map. I don't even remember where Thailand is. Like, why? You know, I had a lot of questions because I hadn't been reading and listening to all the podcasts and stuff that he had, and so it took me a while to come around to that concept. And I was like, well, what do you mean? We've only been working like 2 years. Like, we can't take 6 months off. So this was kind of brewing in the back of our brains, but I still think Jared wanted to wait a while longer, you know, maybe 4 years in or so. Like, he wanted to wait until we had a little bit more of a better nest egg, if you will.
For sure.
So we were in Eastern North Carolina for the second time. And I think this was at our like 3-year mark.
Right around 3
years.
years.
We also toyed around with the idea of a permanent job for a little while. Because
we really liked Eastern North Carolina, and we were in a situation where we could have taken permanent jobs there at the clinics that we were at that we liked, mm-hmm. and made a lot of money, like much higher than we would have made in our hometown. That seemed like a great idea. We'd be living right by the beach.
And shout out to our friends in Eastern North Carolina who we love. Yeah. So at this point, we sort of toyed with the idea of taking a perm job. Well, right at this time, I learned of an opportunity. A blogger and a YouTuber that I follow was doing a yoga retreat, a women's health yoga retreat in Morocco. So I was like, hey, Jared, this would be really neat. Remember you said you wanted to travel internationally at some point. What if we went to this and took like a month off? We'd never done that before. I was like, you said you wanted to take a month or 2 off. What if we just did it? And he was like, no, it's too early. We need to continue working, continue saving, continue working, continue saving.
Yeah, and remember that before this, we had only taken probably 4 weeks off in 3 years. So we were working really back to back, trying to work as much as possible.
So just literally out of nowhere, because this Morocco thing happened, and I was really intrigued by it, and I sort of was like, why not? Like, let's just do it. We just said, you know what, let's just do it. So it went from like literally, I think the week before, we'd been talking to our bosses about like, well, maybe we could stay here for a year permanent or whatever, and then maybe travel after that. And we were talking about pay and all this stuff, and then suddenly I convinced Jared, like, hey, there's no time like the present. I don't know. It was great. Well, he tried to say, like, well, maybe they'll do the retreat again next year. And I messaged the girl who now is like my friend, Bree. I was like, Bree, are you going to do it again next year? And she's like, well, I don't know. It's the first one we've ever done, so no. And I was like, Jared, if we don't do it now, we'll miss it. So then it turned into, what if we just take a couple weeks off to go to this Morocco thing and maybe like one place in Europe, to what if we take 2 months off? What if we take 3 months off? What if we, and it just, he started being like, well, once we're already over there, why not go for several months? So just crazy, it just happened.
A big thing about traveling is that the biggest costs are getting to and from the location. So if you can stay in an area for a longer period of time, it decreases your daily cost significantly. So, you know, if you take a 1 week vacation and your flight to and from is $1,000, then that raises the cost per day by a lot. But if you take a 5-month vacation and your flight to and from is $1,000, then that's averaged over a much longer period of time. So basically, it got to the point where I I thought more about it, and I was like, okay, if we're going to Morocco, which is halfway to Southeast Asia, let's just take this opportunity to see some of Europe and then go to Southeast Asia and do what I want to do anyway and see how that goes.
So we just completely derailed our plan, our 5-year plan. I mean, this was like 2.5, 3 years in.
Almost exactly 3 years into traveling.
Yeah, we were like, well, we've only seen the East Coast so far. We haven't done any of that zigzag or any of that West Coast, but why not? And so at this point, basically, Jared kind of declared like semi-retirement because we were only going to be working 6 months that year.
Yeah, so semi-retirement, what does that mean? That pretty much, that's a term that I was using to say that we were just going to work part of the year and take part of the year off. So after 3 years of saving a lot, I got to a position where I could easily, or both of us could easily work part of the year, half the year, and then take the other half of the year off to travel or do whatever we wanted. And that was kind of a very freeing thing in my mind to think, you know, I can easily cover all of my costs, not only in just 6 months, but 6 months of working, but really in like 3 months of working or even less to have the rest of the time to travel or do whatever we wanted to do.
Yeah. So something I didn't mention in this whole mess of our timeline is somewhere along the lines, about a year in, Jared decided to start a blog. So he started the Fifth Wheel PT blog. That slowly grew a little bit. We were making a little bit of income off the website, but by no means, you know, were we living off the income of the website. So I think a lot of people look at this and think, oh, you guys are bloggers, so you have basically an online business that you make money from. That's why you don't work full time. But the truth of the matter is, just from our travel contracts and being wise with our money, we got to a point of financial stability where we could only work part-time.
Yeah, in reality with the website, I started that mostly for education for other people. I hoped that at some point that would get to a situation where I bring in a few $1,000s per year to be able to cover a couple weeks off of travel therapy. So I wanted to build a website that would cover 2 weeks of off per year for us to, you know, take a break from travel therapy and that cover that income.
But really, we were able to just put ourselves in such a good financial situation just strictly from the travel contracts and strictly from being frugal and being smart, not taking very much time off. So when we kind of get into our advice about, like, if you guys are new to travel therapy, if you're thinking about doing travel therapy, a big thing is just trying to be really frugal with your money in the beginning and saving up, because so many people reach out to us and want to know how we got to the point we're at. We actually got there a lot quicker than we thought we would. We had never planned on only working part-time after only 3 years of working. It just sort of happened.
In reality, when I did I am a very plan-oriented person, I guess, long-term plan. And when I planned all this out, I was like coming up with a budget and hypothetical, how much would our expenses be? How much would our income be? How long would it take based on this expected investment return to get to a certain point in the future? And I thought that would be about 5 years. In reality, it ended up only being about 3 years because our expenses were significantly lower than I planned and our income ended up being higher than I planned, which is a great position to be in.
Yep. So I want to talk a little bit more about kind of our timeline and where we are now and all that stuff. But just real quick, if you guys are watching, if you wouldn't mind just giving us a thumbs up, leaving us a comment. I see a bunch of you guys joined in, but you're all quiet tonight. I guess because we're talking so much. So hey Lauren, hey Jordan, hey Sierra, hey Angela, hi Kyle, Austin, Josh, Danielle, Ryan, Cheryl, Cannon. Thank you guys so much for joining. We'd love if you just say hi in the comments. Click the like button. Tell us who you are. Are you guys students? Are you current clinicians? Are you current travelers? Are you thinking about traveling? Tell us if you think we're crazy. Tell us if you think that you want to do something like we do. How long do you plan to travel? Because I know, like I said, a lot of people only plan to travel for 1 to 3 years. I would say the average life of a travel therapist is like 3 years. So
I bet it's less than that.
We're kind of weird to be doing like a 5-year plan, and as you're going to find out, it's a little longer than 5 years now. But yeah, so kind of just a little bit more about our timeline. We'll jump back into that and then we'll give you guys some advice too. But we'd love if you'd say hi and tell us your plan.
So at 3 years, we decided to take this crazy 5-month trip that we at the time thought was insane. Everyone told us was insane. We had no idea how it would turn out, and it turned out really awesome. We really enjoyed it. We went to Morocco, went to I think 3 or 4 countries in Europe, and then we went to 5 or 6 countries in Asia. We traveled for way less than we thought we'd be able to, so way less in terms of cost. It was pretty cheap for us to travel. I kept track of all my expenses, and it turned out that what we had saved was easily, the investment returns of what we'd saved was easily enough to cover the expenses while we were traveling, which was really exciting because that meant that, oh wow, we really can take 6 or 9 months off per year to travel internationally and be fine.
Yeah, so that just changed everything. So while we were also on this first trip, we had been sort of thinking about doing something different with our blog, with our website. And Jared was like, maybe we could change the name to try to focus it more towards travel therapy, or maybe we should start something new. So we ended up, while we were in Asia, just had the time, had the inspiration to start the new website, Travel Therapy Mentor.
Yeah, this was a weird situation for me because when I decided to start the website initially, Fifth Wheel PT, I purposely made the name vague. And I don't think it's a great name by any means, but I wanted to make it very vague so that I could write about a variety of things because I have a lot of interests. I like finance, I like fitness, I like nutrition, I like travel therapy. So I wanted to be able to write about a lot of things. I like philosophy. I like to write about all of that. So I didn't want to pigeonhole myself into one topic. Well, what ended up happening with that is that when you write about a variety of things, you don't build that much of a consistent followers, I guess, because people don't never know what to expect when they go to your website. So I knew that was kind of an issue. Mostly I was writing about finance, but I realized that a lot of the readers were travel therapists or PTs that wanted to know about travel therapy. So it got to this point where we kind of needed 2 different websites because I wanted to continue to write about finance, but I also wanted to write about travel therapy, and I wanted a more focused website to write about travel therapy.
Yep. So while we were on our first of hopefully come to many international trips, we decided to start the new website, and that has also helped to change our trajectory because now it kind of went from being just a blog to more of an online business. And it definitely helps to sustain our lifestyle that we've now created from year 3 on. We do earn a little bit more income from it being more of an online business versus just the blog. So, all along during this background of our journey, it gave us something to do. It gave us something to work on, because some people were kind of like, you had a lot of naysayers, like, well, what are you going to do on vacation for 5 months? What are you going to do in Asia for 5 months? And I was like, well, just besides be awesome and just see all the cool things, eat all the cool things, and just have amazing experiences, it's nice to have structure and purpose and goals. So, it really gave us an opportunity to work on a project and build something while we're gone. So we try to structure our day as part work, part fun.
Yeah, and that is a valid question and criticism. Like, what are you going to do with all that time? And I was also nervous about that. I thought that it would be great. We'd be traveling, we'd be doing all this great stuff. In reality, traveling is not always wonderful. It's not always glamorous like you would imagine it would be. Or if you watch, or if you follow people on Instagram that travel internationally, they make their lives seem wonderful. And we probably did the same thing on our Instagram, but in reality, it's not great all the time. It is fun. There are wonderful times, but there are also a lot of difficulties with traveling. And we struggled a lot with structure. So having websites or something that we could work on that we felt like was work in addition to what we were doing day to day for a 5-month vacation, essentially, was really helpful for us.
Yep. So it's really just grown and evolved in ways that we never would have thought. Like, we've had people reach out to us. I think we wrote an article about this, about starting a blog and trying to find some kind of side hustle where you make money and this sort of thing. Should I start a website? It just sort of evolved for us. We never really planned to be working part-time. We never planned to be traveling half the year internationally. We never planned to have a website. It just kind of happened and evolved, and it's turned out really cool, and it's better than what we could have planned when we were third-year PT students. It's just happened.
Yeah. It seems weird because I thought I had everything planned out. I thought it was going to be a great way to do things. 5 years traveling, seeing a bunch of the country, saving a lot of money, getting investment properties. Almost none of that ended up happening. But I do think it is a better position now than what I originally planned, which is kind of weird to think about. But yeah, our thought process, our motivation, everything evolved over that time.
So kind of at that 3rd year mark when we worked half that year and traveled half that year, we decided we could just do this every year. So then it was like, okay, maybe from now on we'll only take 1 or 2 3-month travel assignments each year and then do a big long trip each year. So when we got back from our trip, our very first trip out of the country, we thought, okay, we'll go home for, it was around Christmas time, And then after that, we'll take a job in January of, what would this have been? 19? January of 2019?
Yeah, 2019.
In Arizona. Okay, we got these Arizona licenses the year before. Finally, we're going to go out west, right?
But guess what? Nothing goes as planned. We found out in our life. So yeah, plan to go to Arizona in the winter. Should be wonderful. Everyone apparently plans to go to Arizona in the winter because it's wonderful. So there were no open jobs. The ones that were open were terrible. We interviewed for a couple and we did not want to do that. So we ended up going back to Virginia,
Yes.
which is our home state.
So in some ways, we were really disappointed about this. We were like, oh my God, we suck as travel therapists. Like, we're never going to make it out west. We're only just going to be doomed to stay on the East Coast. But in some ways, it was kind of a blessing because we had already started thinking about our next international trip. And we thought, well, we've been out of the country for like 5 or 6 months. Wouldn't it be nice to be sort of close to home for a while? So we ended up taking another job in Virginia about like 3 or 4 hours from home.
Yep.
And literally right after that, we had already planned our next trip. So then right after that in spring of 2019, so it would have been right around this time last year, we left for Europe. And we went to Europe for 4 months.
Yeah, and in reality, at the end of our Europe trip, at the end of our Asia trip, the first trip we went on in 2018, the 5-month trip, I was pretty sold on the fact that I wanted to travel a lot more internationally. And I think Whitney was sort of on the same page with that. So at the end of that trip, I had already started planning a trip to Europe. I wanted to see a lot more of Europe. And so basically, as soon as we got back, we started working on planning that trip. And yeah, we left for that in spring of last year. We were gone for 4 months all over Europe. And that was another awesome trip. Probably even better than the first one.
So when we got back from that, we kind of had some new plans. Our website had really picked up for a travel therapy mentor. We wanted to start doing some other endeavors. Like we had been really putting off going to any kind of conferences because part of it was we didn't want to take the time off work those first couple of years to, have downtime where you're not getting paid, and also to have to fly across the country if the conference was across the country. Well, in 2019, we said enough of that. We actually had the opportunity to go to CSM in January of 19 because we happened to be at home because we were looking for jobs, and it took us like a month and a half to find jobs, and CSM was only like 4.5 hours away, so we just drove there.
Yeah.
And when we got our first taste of that conference, we thought, let's do more conferences. So in the fall of 19, we were like, okay, we don't need to start working again right away, like soon, but not right away. So we planned all these conferences. So we went on a huge epic road trip across the country to go to TravCon, which is in Vegas every year in September. So this was our first taste of actually finally getting to see a little bit of the country, not for a travel assignment, but just for fun.
And it was awesome.
Yeah, so we drove through the Midwest. We got to see as far west as Colorado and Arizona. We didn't make it to California just yet. And then we came back via like the southern route and got to see a little bit more of the Midwest and New Mexico and places like that. So that was amazing. So that was like, finally we were like, yes, we're going to be like real travel therapists, and we're going to see the mountains and the Rockies and just everything. So that was really cool. And that was in the fall. We also did a couple of traveler meetups. We did a conference in Albuquerque. We spoke at the National Student Conclave. So we just started kind of just working on all these new things that, like I said, we couldn't have imagined back in 2015.
Not at all. And in reality, that trip we took in 2018, the 5-month trip that we went to Europe and Asia, kind of changed everything because not only did we discover that we were able to do that kind of thing and still be fine financially, but a big thing in my mind, when I started the website about 9 months into traveling, being a PT, I set goals for myself for where I wanted to be financially. And that was a great thing, but it was also a terrible thing because I really locked myself into, I need to earn this amount consistently. I need to work constantly. I need to be doing everything possible, working overtime, making extra money on the side, all these things to try to reach this goal. So it was great to have the goal, but in reality, it really kind of made things miserable for me and probably by proxy Whitney. So that trip where I couldn't really earn much money and it was kind of just all out the window made me realize it's really not that big of a deal.
I think we're going to talk a little bit more about kind of a summary, but it's hard. I think as humans, we're always trying to think about like the end result, like the destination. And as they always say, you kind of learn that the journey is the destination.
For sure.
So you need to enjoy the journey and not be so focused on the goal. It's good to have goals. It's good to have priorities. Saving and investing in your career is just is wonderful and it sets you up for success later. But I do think those first few years we were probably a little bit too rigid. Like literally everybody's like, oh, are you gonna go to CSM? Are you gonna go to TravCon? And we were like, no, we can't take off time and fly to Vegas. Like that's gonna cost us $1,000. Like we can't do that, or more than $1,000 if you count for the week of missed work. So we just were so focused on that the first few years, and we just didn't even know what we were missing. So finally in 2019 we were like, we're going to all the conferences. So it was great.
Yep.
So that was in the fall, this past fall. So then when it came time towards the end of the fall, we were like, well, we should probably take another job, right? Like we haven't worked in like 6 months. So I took another job. Well, again, we were kind of like, should we go to Arizona? We got that Arizona license. We were also sort of waiting on the compact to come through. We were finally like, when's Virginia going to join the compact? So we could go to some other states and not have to like do our little rigid, like only get licensed in this one state where it has a lot of jobs. So we ended up going back to North Carolina. So I took another job in North Carolina. There weren't a lot of jobs. Things were starting to go downhill this past fall, and they've continued to go downhill with the jobs. So I ended up at another job in North Carolina. We were going to try to find 2 jobs, but it didn't work out. And
it didn't work out, and the website got to where really it needed more than just 2 part-time people. We kind of needed more time than that. So I started working on the website more. Whitney was working still on it part-time and also working as a traveler.
So this was the first time that I took a job and Jared didn't. Normally we always find 2 jobs together, but this past fall into the winter was the first time I took a job and Jared didn't. He's also a little bit more financially ahead of me just because he's saved a little bit more than I have over the past several years. So all of a sudden we were at 4.5 years and we still had only taken jobs in Massachusetts and Virginia and North Carolina. So as like our 4.5, 5 year mark was approaching, we were like, we're not ready to settle down. Like this lifestyle is just awesome. We love what we've built. And this whole like, oh, I'm going to be 30, we should settle down. I was like, it'll be fine. So kind of where we're at now is we're not ready to settle down.
We're not ready to settle down. We plan to continue traveling, probably 1 contract per year, maybe 2. At this point, I haven't worked in over a year, I think.
Jared needs a job.
Yeah, so I've worked a total of 10 weeks as a PT in the last
work history.
like 19 months. So yeah, I'm a little worried about going back to work, not only because I feel a little rusty, but also
do some mobilizations.
Yeah, but also I'm worried about employers not wanting to hire someone with such a long, extensive gap. But at the same time, I don't need to work in terms of finances, which is a great position to be in.
Yeah.
So
now we're kind of caught up to what's going on now, and if you're a regular watcher of our videos or follower of our websites, you probably know that we were planning our 3rd big international trip. Again, kind of as soon as we'd finished the other one, we were like, okay, now a few months of this, a few months of work, and now time for another trip. So we had another trip planned. I finished my travel contract in North Carolina on the beginning of February, and then we had CSM this year in Denver, and then it was going to be just like a couple weeks, and then we were going to leave in March for South America, and then suddenly this pandemic hit.
Yeah. So
we were supposed to right now be in South and Central America. We were going to be traveling for another good long 5-month trip. And then after that, again, we were going to do another road trip like we did last year to TravCon, and then after that take another job, kind of a duplicate of last year. Completely got derailed, and we had sort of been thinking about buying a place. So kind of on the back burner for the past 5 years has been real estate. So Jared really wanted to get into real estate investing. His dream for a long time has been to get a duplex or some kind of multi-family living thing, so we could have part of it as our home base and then part of it as a financial vehicle.
Yeah, and when she says this has been an idea for a long time, literally since I was 18. Since I graduated high school, I've been looking at duplexes and triplexes to buy and rent out. So this has been a very long time.
Yep. So we were thinking about probably going ahead and doing that this fall when we got back from Central and South America. But because we weren't able to go to Central and South America, and we decided there's just so much uncertainty right now in terms of we're not able to travel. And for the foreseeable future, for the next several months, we decided we're just going to stay put. A lot of people have asked us, are we going to get a job? Well, there's several reasons. One, our mindset was that we were going to be traveling for the next 5 to 6 months. So mindset wise, like I'm not ready to go back to work because I've already decided that I wasn't going to be working. Second, the job market has gone down significantly. Third, in our opinion, if you're working right now in healthcare, you are exposing yourself, and there's a risk there. So there's a lot of reasons.
Well, fourth, we had this trip almost over half the trip planned already. We had flights and hotels and everything booked. So we were kind of holding out hope that, okay, we can't do the first week. Okay, maybe we can pick that back up on the second week. Okay, that didn't work out. Maybe the third week. And it's kind of just pushed back progressively.
So we just really weren't sure, like, would we resume traveling? At one point we thought maybe at least we could pick it back up in May, but now it's May. It's not going to be May anymore. It is May.
Yep.
And so it's becoming more clear that we're not going to be able to resume traveling. So for all those reasons, we weren't eager to pick up a new job. So we decided we're going to be in our hometown for a little while anyway, be close to family. So we decided, why not go ahead and start keeping an eye out for properties. And if you watched our last video, we ended up buying a house in our hometown.
Yeah, and this was not expected, something kind of just keeping an eye out, but then this deal popped up that was so good that couldn't really pass up, and we ended up getting it.
Yep, so here we are, we're in our new townhouse, and the cool thing about our townhouse is it turned out to be a really good deal financially, and it also has a lot of potential in the future as potentially renting out a room or multiple rooms or the whole unit if we decide to not keep it as our home base anymore. So a lot of people have been asking us, okay, what's your plan now? Are you guys done traveling? Are you just going to settle down and get permanent jobs? Heck no. We're not planning on settling down. We just plan on being here for the next few months, and then hopefully in the fall or late summer we might be able to resume some type of travel for fun, or a job, hopefully for fun. And then we do plan to continue traveling. We hope that we'll be able to continue doing about half the year of work, half the year of travel for fun.
Probably less work, more travel.
Yeah, so maybe just 3 to 6 months, but probably just 3 months of work. And continue to travel for fun the rest of the year. It's just time's gonna have to tell if we're allowed, if we're able to travel, because we're not really sure when things are gonna be safe to go to a lot of countries.
Yeah, I mean, 2018 we went to Asia primarily. 2019 we went to Europe. This year we were planning to go to Central and South America. We had another trip probably next year that we were kind of in the contemplation phase about going to Australia, New Zealand, and then another trip we wanted to go back to Asia, like mainland Asia. So, and even Eastern Europe. So there was a lot of trips we want to do, but now we have no idea how that's going to work out.
Yeah, so kind of right now, like a lot of people, we're in limbo, but we're pretty sure we'll probably be here in Roanoke, just kind of working on the house, working on the websites, working on other things that we've been kind of putting on the back burner for a while, probably till July, August, and then we're really, really hoping that we'll still be able to do TravCon. I know if any current travelers are watching, y'all are probably hoping that TravCon will also still be on in September. So right now we're just gonna wait and see. We hope to be able to take another long road trip, a different route across the country. So our goal is, even if it's not safe or not allowed or whatever, to travel internationally by the late summer, early fall. Hopefully it'll at least be more PC and more allowable to travel within the States.
We're going to do some sort of travel as soon as possible because, at this point where we had our heart set on this long trip, we'd been researching
We still got our bags packed in the corner.
We've been researching Machu Picchu and the Salt Flats and all these amazing places in Central and South America.
I got a call tomorrow to cancel our flight to the Salt Flats.
So now we have to, we're kind of set on that, and we're going to get back traveling as soon as we possibly can.
Yeah. So that's kind of a little bit about our plan. We also hope to get more into real estate investing now that we've bought our first house. We're going to keep this one as our tax home and our home base, and we're going to keep an eye out to see what the housing market does in the coming months with the economy and everything. We've been saving up for a while to hopefully get into some real estate investing. So now that we've pulled the trigger on the first one, we kind of have a little bit better idea of what to do. So that's hopefully in the works. In terms of settling down, we don't know. I mean,
probably at least a couple more years.
Yeah, I'd say 2 to 3 on the early end. I mean, there is still the whole biological clock thing if we do want to have kids. I mean, I know people are having kids later and later, but I feel like 33, 34. We'll see.
Probably the limit, yeah.
It's my last month in my 20s. So we'll see. So that's kind of where we're at in terms of our plan.
Somewhere in there, a couple months ago, we sold the camper. So we talked about buying the camper. We sold the camper, any future travel contracts, we're just going to do short-term housing. The main reason for that is that we did not want to we're only planning to do, in reality, probably one contract per year. So it doesn't make sense to store a camper for 9 months of the year when you're only going to be using it for 3. So
yeah, we're going to do another video just more specifically delving in to our choice to stop using the RV, but it had kind of run its course. I mean, there was a few reasons. We were just sort of done with it.
Yep.
A lot of people reach out to us about RVing, so we'll do a separate video about RVing, but we enjoyed the tiny life.
Had it about 4 years.
And now it's just time to move on to a different phase. So let's read a few of you guys' comments, and then we're going to just sort of summarize and give you guys recommendations for your own journeys.
Yeah, we'll go through our takeaways, things that we've learned over this time period for any new travelers or current travelers.
Yeah. So Andrea says she's a third-year student in Miami. My boyfriend and I are planning on doing travel PT. All of your videos have been such a huge help with our plan. That's great, Andrea.
Awesome.
Thank you for watching. Karen says, I'm in my 5th year of travel therapy. Congratulations, Karen.
Awesome.
I love to see, we met somebody at, was it CSM? Who had traveled longer than us.
It was like 7 or 8 years.
And it's rare that we've met a few travelers that travel longer than us, but it's rare.
I don't know when we became like the old travelers and like the experienced ones, because I still feel new after 5 years, but yeah, I guess it's kind of rare to get to that long.
Yeah, I mean, we know definitely a handful of people who travel longer than us. We know a few that have been 10 years, 7, 8 years, but it's not that many.
Yeah. Brianna says, first year student in Birmingham, Alabama. I'm interested in travel therapy and wanted to know more about it. Awesome.
Thank you for joining us, Brianna. Brianna, we have a ton of other videos. If you want to learn more about travel therapy, you can also visit our website at traveltherapymentor.com. We have a ton of educational articles. If you're just a first year or a second year student in grad school, read through those articles. That's a good way to just sort of know, you don't even know the questions to ask. So go and just read through that, how to get started, all that good stuff, and then let us know if you have questions.
Yep. Deshawnda said, hi, third year student, thinking of doing travel therapy when I graduate. It feels a bit crazier because of the current pandemic. Yeah, it's really honestly not a great time to travel. We talked about that. If you go back a few weeks, we talked about how this is really a very bad time to start traveling as a new grad. Unfortunately, but hopefully in the next few months that will change.
Yeah.
But right now, if you can find a permanent job or at least a part-time job in your hometown, that's probably the best way to go.
Yeah, we're really hoping the travel therapy job market will pick up in the next few months, but it's just we're gonna have to see.
Leanne says, do you have any recommendations for newbie investing for dummies? I would say there's a book called The Boglehead's Guide to Investing. I think that's a really good one to start with. There's a book called The Millionaire Next Door, which is not so much about investing, but more about kind of mindset behind saving. Probably a very good book to start with. There's a lot of good websites, blogs, that kind of thing, podcasts that I listen to. Actually, on the Fifth Wheel PT website, there's a tab at the top that says like recommendations, and that has a list of websites.
I'll link to it after the video. I'll give you the link. It's just a list of resources.
Yeah.
Thanks for your question. Okay, a couple more here, and then we'll give you guys our summary. Melanie says, I've traveled twice during my career, early and then later on. My early jobs, I did your approach. I limited the locations closer to home. Later in my career, it was completely different. It was all about living all over the country. I wanted to experience more locations, and I wasn't so picky about settings. I have worked in them all. It was more about the location for me, and I did that for more than 5 years.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
I think all travelers evolve in what's important to them. So like I mentioned, for us, in the beginning it was finances. Later on, after year 3, it's all been flexibility. So we do not care about making as much money anymore. We care about being able to take time off, basically just work temporarily, that kind of thing.
Yep. Thanks for your insight, Melanie. We appreciate that. Danielle says, I'm a past traveler for 2.5 years. I loved it for the most part. I like that in the parentheses because it's not always perfect.
No, it's not.
And it helped pay off my loans. I also love travel and finance, so your content is great. Thanks,
awesome.
Danielle.
Yeah, thanks for joining.
We heard from Melanie again. Melanie says, funny that you said about the investment properties. I did that with my money during my early travel. I bought several during my first 2 years of traveling, and I still own them and make money off them. Awesome.
Yeah, I think investing in real estate is a great way to go.
Yeah, we talked about that last week, kind of how you can make those things hand in hand. I think once you're a traveler, it's really hard to get past loving this lifestyle. Like, we know a lot of people that have settled down into permanent jobs, and then they kind of miss this lifestyle. So if you are able to find a way to get more passive income or some other type of income where you can make a flexible lifestyle like real estate investing, it really allows you to still explore and do fun things and not have to be tied down to a permanent job.
Yep. Jenny said, I'm finishing up my first travel assignment as an OT in New Mexico. My recruiter is working hard to find my next placement. I have no real plans for location or timeline. Just want to see the U.S., pay off my loans, and hope to find a lifelong travel companion along the way. I can't wait to travel internationally in the future. Sounds like an awesome plan. It's hard to find jobs right now, but hopefully that will pick up. But yeah, as long as you're flexible on location and setting and things like that, definitely makes it a lot easier.
Yeah.
Blake says, is one setting more difficult to land over another as a new grad traveler?
Sometimes, yes. Sometimes the outpatient, especially private practice outpatient, tends to want people with more experience. So sometimes it's harder to get into an outpatient if you don't have experience. Sometimes it's also hard to get into acute, especially big hospitals. Big hospital systems usually want you to have experience. I would say like SNF is pretty much always willing to take a new grad.
Yeah, it's also harder to get into home health as a new grad. So I would say your best options as a new grad are probably skilled nursing, inpatient rehab, which is fairly rare travel assignment, or hospital-based outpatient.
Or small rural hospitals. So usually you can get into a small rural hospital, but not necessarily like a big major metropolitan hospital. And then you can kind of get your feet wet, get some job history on your resume, get some experience at a smaller hospital, and then next time when you try to apply for a bigger hospital, they'll be willing to take you. Leanne says, I'm finishing up my first year as a travel OT and I don't want to extend. My contract ends in a month, but my options are limited. Yeah, right now it's really hard. Like I said, we've talked in our last several weeks videos about the current job market, and you really have to weigh your options right now. And for a lot of people, extending is the only option. But if you really hate your job or don't want to extend, then you could be faced with not having a job right away lined up. So you have to weigh whether you're going to be able to financially afford to wait it out for another job, or you might have to jump on something that's less desirable. Yeah. So it's a really tricky time right now in the job market.
Brianna says, second year current traveler. Thank you guys for all the comments and questions.
Yes, thank you. So we kind of just want to summarize like what our recommendations are from our little wisdom from our 5 years of traveling. So,
okay, the big thing is let your plans evolve. This is something that I was so strict on in the beginning. Like I said, so strict to the point that I think it made our lives more miserable, which is a crazy thing because this is really a great lifestyle. Don't be so strict on plans that you make yourself unhappy. Be in a position where you're ready to change based on what circumstances are thrown at you. You can't have such a rigid plan as a traveler because it's so uncertain. Yeah. You don't know where jobs are going to be. You don't know what's going to happen with the market. You don't know what's going to happen. A pandemic like this, you never know when something like this is going to happen. So have some flexibility in your plans. It's always great to have plans and goals, but be flexible about it.
Mm-hmm. I think that's important for anybody, whether you do travel therapy or not. It's important to kind of think about a 5-year plan, think about a 2-3 year plan, and see, it's good to know, am I going to be the type of traveler that's only going to travel for a year, or do I think I might want to do this for 3 to 5 years? Because that might change your decision making when it comes to jobs. Like I said, if you knew that you only had a year to do it because maybe your spouse can't travel with you, or for whatever reason you only want to do it for a year and then you want to settle down, then you might need to get 4 3-month placements exactly where you want them, which means if you're so rigid on that, you have to be flexible on the pay and the setting. Because if you have to check off Hawaii and whatever, if you want to go to Hawaii, you have to just take whatever setting, whatever pay they're going to pay you because it's Hawaii. Yep. So you have to just sort of have a big picture of like what's important to you, what you kind of think you want your trajectory
list out your
to
priorities.
Look out. Yeah, and then go from there. Because if you're like us and you're like, well, I could travel for 3 to 5 to 6 to 7 years, then you're a little bit more flexible on like, well, I don't have to go to these places because maybe next year I'll have time to go to those places. So it's good to have a big picture of what you want, but don't be so set. We definitely have a lot of people that reach out to us that say, I want to be a travel therapist and I only want to go to Chicago and Austin, Texas and Boston and Hawaii. And I'm like, well, it might not happen. You can't be that strict because as we've found out with travel therapy, like you just never know where the jobs are going to be. you can't predict this week what jobs are going to be open next week. You can't predict this month what jobs are going to be open next month. You have to just be willing to go where the jobs are, or you have to be independently wealthy and have money to not work for a while, because if you're being so rigid, you won't be able to find jobs.
Yep. Another big thing is, as I mentioned, we were very, very structured in our saving and investing early on. Like I said, I think we took that a little overboard, especially me. But with that being said, if we had not been that way, we would not be able to do the things we're doing now. So I think it's very important to save and live below your means early on as a traveler. Invest in your future, and that will open up a ton of doors later on to do whatever you want, really. Like I said, we are in a position now where we can travel internationally as long as we want. We can travel domestically as long as we want. We can stay at home as long as we want. It really has changed everything for us. So live below your means, save, invest. It's very important.
I think a lot of people look at big paychecks and they think, wow, I'm going to be making a big paycheck. They're going to be giving me all this money every week to go towards housing, so I can afford an apartment that costs this, or I can afford to rent an entire place that costs $2,000 a month or whatever, because they're paying me $900 a week. Well, the thing is, you need to account for expenses at home. You have to pay duplicate housing. You need to account for getting money into savings in case there's downtime. There's a reason why they pay us more. It's because there's more risk. There might be times where you don't have work. And if you really, really want to design a lifestyle somewhat similar to what we've done and be able to take more time off, you need to be putting money away. So live below your means. Don't get really expensive housing. Try to minimize the time between your contracts for at least the first year, so that you don't have unpaid time off. Just keep your expenses low. Don't go out to eat every day, every week. Don't go out to drinking all the time. Just keep your expenses low so that you can have extra money to have more freedom and flexibility. There's several reasons for that. One, so you can take more time off like we do, if that's a goal of yours. Two, so you can put more money into investing for your future or paying off loans. And three, so you don't have to be stuck taking a job you don't want to take. If you're really desperate for work, like a lot of people are right now who don't have a lot of savings, they're going to end up taking just any job that's available, and it might be a really crappy job, but they don't have a choice because they can't go 2, 3, 4 weeks without work because they need the money. So having extra money saved really helps you in so many facets.
Yeah, that flexibility is very important.
And I also just want to talk about, in terms of letting your plans evolve, don't be so rigid in your plans and your mindset that you shy away from opportunities, because you might come into it thinking, well, I only want to go to this place and I only want to work in this setting. But sometimes your recruiter, might offer you a job and say it's, in Oklahoma or something, and you're like, I don't want to go to Oklahoma. Well, what if you end up having a really cool experience in Oklahoma? You don't know. So you can't always predict what's going to be best for you later. You might really think that you absolutely have to go to Tucson, Arizona to have the best experience possible. But what if you end up in Yuma and it's a really small city and you still could go to Tucson on the weekend?
An example of that in our situation was when we were talking about how we wanted to go to Illinois, but then we ended up going to the coast of North Carolina. That was an opportunity that just kind of popped up. We were not we're not planning to do that, and we didn't expect to do that at all. We took that opportunity, and it turned out to be one of the better things we did. I mean, it was one of our best assignments. We met a lot of good friends. We really enjoyed the area. So let some spontaneity happen in your travel plans.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the best pieces of advice that we can give. I mean, you just don't always know when you right away graduate exactly what you want in terms of setting, in terms of location. You don't know who you're going to meet, what you're going to encounter. Maybe you really wanted to be in a big city, but you ended up in a small town and it ended up being really cool and you had some great coworkers and your caseload was lighter. You don't know. So just be open and be flexible, and don't be too rigid in your plans, because we're definitely proof of that, of it didn't go the way we planned, but I'm 100% happy with where we are. I don't have any regrets.
Yeah, and I guess the last piece of advice I would give you is, if things don't work out like you planned, you're not a failure as a traveler. Everyone has their own situation. Like Whitney said, after being 3 years on the East Coast, back in 2018, we were like, wow, we are terrible travelers. We just stay in the same area. We haven't seen much of the country. What are we doing? But in reality, I think that was what worked out best for us. I think really, if I could go back to 2015 now, I would have set up the life of this instead of that zigzag and everything that we had planned. I think that this worked out well. It gave us a lot of freedom to travel on our own time and not just have to go to an assignment, work there, take weekend trips. Now we can spend as long as we want in those locations.
And we're kind of looking at, a plan B for the current situation. So right now we should be in Paraguay or Bolivia. Yeah.
Bolivia.
We should be traveling in South America. We should be working on our Spanish. We should be eating all the delicious food and taking amazing photos. Instead, we're at home and we bought a house instead. Maybe we won't be able to go out of the country later this year, but I've already kind of started to formulate a plan B. Well, obviously plan B, we have a house now. That's pretty cool. And I was talking to him about earlier is if we don't end up even in the fall being able to travel internationally, maybe it'll give us even more time to explore our own country for a little while. And now that we are eligible for the compact, we're going to be more open to jobs. It took a while for our state to join the compact, but we're going to maybe be a little bit more flexible if say everything's really different for the whole next year or 2 years. Say they don't recommend that you travel internationally for the next 2 years. Well, then maybe we'll take more assignments on the West Coast and do what we planned to do a while back.
Or maybe we'll take more road trips and see more national parks. We want to try to go to all the national parks before we settle down. So that would be a good opportunity.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know. We kind of had this deadline in mind of well, when I turn 30 or, about 30, shouldn't we be getting married and having kids and settling down? But there are so many people that have exemplified that just because you need to have kids or you need to get married or you need to buy a house doesn't mean that has to be the end of this chapter and start a whole new chapter. We have friends that do travel therapy with their child. We know people or have read from bloggers that live internationally, travel internationally with children, come home. There's all kinds of different ways you can set up your lifestyle. So there doesn't have to be an exact deadline in which we stop our travel lifestyle.
Yep. So hopefully those are some good takeaways for you guys. Thanks for sticking in there. I think this might be our longest video ever. And I thought this was going to be very short. I thought we were going to do a 20-minute overview and some takeaways.
We can talk about ourselves for a long time.
Yeah. Apparently,
there's probably a lot of details we left out too.
Yeah, apparently we're very good at talking about ourselves. So
yeah.
If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thanks for joining. We do these videos every week. I think we're probably 14 or 15 months into weekly videos now. So any questions, comments, video ideas, feel free to reach out to us.
Yeah, thank you guys. Carol says, I really appreciate that you mentor us. It's a valuable service. Thanks, Carol. We appreciate it. Becky said, yes, I went to Alaska. I had no clue what I was getting into, and I stayed for over a year, and now I want to move back. That's so cool, Becky. We would love to go to Alaska. So again, if you guys have questions, feel free to leave a comment. If you got value out of this video, if you learned something, if you enjoyed it, please give us a thumbs up on the video. Tag a friend who could be interested in hearing about this content and this advice. And
if you guys ever take travel assignments in Southwest Virginia, let us know. We have a house here now. And
I know,
we might be renting out to travelers.
We might be renting out the room next door to travelers. So thank you guys again. We really appreciate it.
If you could, leave us a comment, like this video, heart this video. The more engagement we get, the more people see this video, which is always a great thing.
Wait, one more comment from Melanie because I'm intrigued about what she says. I'm from Virginia also. I have now stopped traveling. I had a travel assignment in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I won't ever go back to Virginia.
Yeah.
So that's something to consider. We've definitely thought about, is this where we want to settle down forever? Would we maybe think about, go Hokies, yeah. We have some Virginia Tech.
We're actually only 45 minutes from Blacksburg, so I'm a Virginia Tech fan for sure.
So I don't know. Who knows if this is where we will settle down. I mean, we've talked about looking out west to settle down. We've talked about living in Portugal. We'll see. But for now, we have this home base in Virginia, and then we'll see.
Yep. Thank you guys. We'll see you next week. Thanks for joining.
Bye, guys.
Bye.